Hey guys, I'm Learning TFT, back with another video where I'm going to share my learnings with you so that we can all learn together more effectively. In this video, I'm going to go through the unit tiers at each cost for patch 14.20. I have this filtered by Master Plus since the sample size is quite small still. It's only 1 day of data so far. And we're going to go through each of the cost tiers and put each unit into tiers with the criteria of the AVP, the frequency with which these units are played, how flexible and what comps they go into. So even though a unit might perform really well in conditional circumstances, like let's say Warwick with Corrupt Vampiric Scepter reroll, I'm not going to be tiering them super high just because it's super conditional. So this is kind of a holistic picture, including some conditional stuff like emblems, but not being so specific as to say just purely what's best AVP. We're going to start with the forecasts, and I'm starting with kind of a high level picture of what is good as far as AVP and frequency played. But more specifically, I have filtered the data by 2-star and 3 items to see how strong these units are as carries or tanks when they're fully itemized, as opposed to if you just look at aggregate stats, you might be seeing how Kalista turns out when it's 1-star, for example. And so we want to do this analysis where we can see how good these units are when you're able to hit them. Of course, the frequency matters. If you're playing contested, that's going to impact your placement. But we want to just start by seeing how strong these units are as much in a vacuum as possible. I broke down these stats by the average placement, the win rate, average placement, this is top 4 percentage and the win percentage. And then the comps that the unit fits into. And so the way I did that was, for example, with Rakan, I searched Rakan and then mainly filtered comps that they are 4.5 and above in so that we can see how often they're played. And I excluded low pick rates, so like Molten Caramel Rumble reroll with Rakan here, I did not include just because the pick rate is so low. And so it's not going to impact that AVP as much. So again, we're looking at holistic picture. So you can see here, I have Fairy Kalista, Wukong, Jinx reroll, Scholar Rise all included here, as well as Six Warrior. So that's kind of how I put this data together. And based off of that, I kind of moved some of the units around just to be able to, for example, with Nami has really great stats. If we go back to this chart, Nami has really great average placement. But the thing with Nami is she's mainly played around very conditional circumstances like 8 portal, mage reroll, and these situations, she is not the main carry. Usually for like portal, Rise will be, with mage reroll, it'll be like Seraphine Soraka or Veigar. And so if you're able to get a 2-star Nami with 3 items, it does extremely well just because you got really late into the game and you're already likely going to finish at a high AVP. Whereas if you just itemize Nami over Rise, you're probably not going to do as well. So I put together a visual tier list based off of this, and we can kind of talk through this and kind of be able to gauge what are strong units as well as what are the strong comps that you can play with them. So for Rise, we have portals. Vertical Portal is good with Rise. We have Scholar, Preserver, Scholar, 4 Preserver, 4 Scholar Rise. We have, what else do we have? 6 Witchcraft Rise if you can get an emblem. So Rise and Kalista are probably your top 2 carries in this patch, with Kalista being good with primarily the Fairy Kalista build that was quite good last patch. Rakan can be played very flexibly with Kalista, with Wukong, Jinx, with Scholar. So Rakan you could play with Kalista, Rise, as well as with Wukong, and Jinx, which are part of the meta as well. So Rakan's probably going to be your most flexible frontline, though he is going to be your most contested frontline as well because of that. Tahm Kench, if you are able to hit him, actually does really well as far as tank goes. He actually has better stats than Taric. Taric is quite conditional, mainly connected with Ryze, whereas you can play Tahm Kench, Arcana, Ryze as well with a flexible frontline. And Tahm Kench, you're going to usually play with Varus under the Arcana Varus build. Varus, now you can actually play with Shapeshifters as well. Nasus was buffed, Shapeshifters were buffed. And so you have a lot more flexibility. Though Tahm Kench, from a frequency standpoint, is still extremely high, has a high play rate, 31%, compared to Rakan, 33%, whereas Nasus is only a 19% play rate. And so if you're going to play Varus here, it might actually be easier to lean towards the Shapeshifter variant, and it actually performs better in the stats as well. Higher AVP, higher win rate. And particularly because Tahm Kench is so contested now, that if you're able to hit, so again, this analysis was broken down by if you're able to hit, these are going to be the units that are going to be strongest to help you win the game, or at least top 4. Of course, if you're stuck on 1-star forecasts, you're probably going to go bot 4 in any case. So that's why it's so important to scout. So we talked about Taric, really mainly connected to Ryze. Anytime you're playing Ryze, you're most likely going to be playing Taric. Olaf does really well in the stats. 3.8. The only reason I've bumped him down is he's similar to Nami, does really well with Jinx Wukong reroll as the 4th hunter you later add in. He's not really core since Jinx is going to be your primary carry. You want to itemize your Jinx 3 and Wukong 3 before you itemize an Olaf 2. Olaf can also be thrown into a Kog'Maw reroll. So these are situations where you get 4 hunter or maybe even get 6 hunter. And so Olaf can be good in those circumstances, though he's not going to be your primary carry. That, I suspect, is why his AVP is so strong. Although this also does suggest that Olaf can be played with this Karma Preserver board at 8 as a replacement for your Fiora Gwen, and we've talked about that in previous videos. You play Olaf Twitch with your Zilean to get 3 Frost. The Frost vertical also got hit hard, and we'll look into that later with the 3 cost especially. Varus, strong with now Shapeshifters or Arcana, so Varus is a lot more flexible as far as your frontline goes. It reminds me of kind of like Ryze, where Ryze you can flex between your Preserver or Arcana frontline, and now Varus you can flex between a Shapeshifter and Arcana frontline, which gives you a lot more flexibility to be able to hit. Fiora, Gwen, Karma, those are your really high cap if you're able to get to level 9 and more importantly play around your 5 cost boards. These are ways that you can stabilize on level 8 also with Olaf to be able to then go to level 9 and hopefully hit your 5 costs and cap out with those. So the AVP on your, if we pull up Preserver Karma, this is really not that great at 4.6 with a 0.7 pick rate. The main thing is you can see here at level 8, this is averages like a 5.5. At level 9, it spikes considerably. So if you're able to get to level 9 and play around your Briar, your Morgana, if you're able to cap out with like Milio, you can even throw in, if you hit Camille, you can move Fiora items over to Camille. So this build is more so to stabilize on 8, but its cap is not as high unless you're able to go 9. So that covers the 4 costs. We'll go into the 3 costs next. So 3 costs, we have Wukong and Jinx as your primary reroll options. Veigar and Vex can be good, though in the B patch it was nerfed, so it's a little bit harder to hit, whereas Jinx and Wukong are usually going to be more stable in the mid game. So we can take a look at the 3 costs. We have Wukong, Jinx, Veigar, Vex, and Bard is just extremely flexible. If we take a look at the 3 costs chart, Bard has the highest play rate amongst all the 3 costs. Next to that is Hecarim, which just speaks to the strength of playing around Preservers and Arcana. And Hecarim can be used in both the Fairy Callista board and the Varus board, whereas Preserver, like we saw with Rakan, can just be played in so many boards. The same thing applies to Bard, particularly because you could play him with the Preserver boards, you play him with Rise on the Scholar board, so very flexible. And then down here in the D tier, we have Swain and Hui. The Frost vertical was hit hard, I suspect due to the Frost Crown nerf, and I'm not sure exactly why else. If you have thoughts or ideas on why Frost was hit so hard, we can talk about that. For example, if we go here, 7 Frost is at 4.9, whereas it was really stable before in the mid game, but now it's been hit pretty hard. So back to the 3 costs, it's really playing around these. Ezreal is more of a portal trait bot now. You don't really play for Blaster as a regular thing. Katarina is more of a trait bot for Fairy Callista. So these are going to be your main carries: Veigar, Vex, Wukong, Jinx. And then at the 2 cost, Kog'Maw actually has the best stats, but he's more of a trait bot. Though there is Kog'Maw reroll that can be played. Galio can be played with now a 1 cost mage reroll if you have learning to spell is quite good. I talked about that in my last video. It did get nerfed a little bit in the B patch, though that hit Vex specifically more, and the verticals more. 3 mage still got a sizable boost, which allows you to really stabilize on the 1 cost. And especially with learning to spell, you can start scaling that AP. So Galio can be quite good as a main tank in that build. Kog'Maw reroll, and more importantly, Kog'Maw's good with Jinx and Wukong reroll. And then Zilean, same with the other preservers. Zilean's just super flexible, can be played in so many comps when you throw in Preserver. Pairs well chrono-wise with Karma, though the Frost vertical kind of took a big hit, so it's not as strong. Rumble can still be played with the hero augment. You play 4 Vanguard reroll with Tristana, trying to hit the 3 stars for both of them. Tristana otherwise doesn't really have a place in the meta. You're not really trying to play vertical blasters. You are using her as a placeholder for Milio in the Fairy Callista build, and so she gets taken out. Ahri can be played with Arcana Rise and Arcana Varus. And then Kassadin reroll is just not as strong now, particularly because with Veigar back in the meta, there's so much burst that melee gets hit pretty hard. That also contributes to why the 4 costs Warriors got hit. Warriors in general just aren't as good in 1420 because there's so much more burst. And you have Wukong 3 to contend with. Rakan's still very strong, so getting to that backline can be challenging. And then we have our 1 costs. So at 1 cost, we have Zoe and Namzi as performing best AVP wise, though that's not necessarily because they're going to be carries. You're not really trying to 3-star them. The exception being Namzi. If you have an upgraded adventure, you can reroll Namzi, Twitch, Jace, and Elise for your core 4 and then build around a shapeshifter vertical. I got a first in a game on 1420 using that strategy. Namzi got better because Shyvana got a buff with shapeshifters. What else? The Smolder also got a buff, and so playing around 3 dragon got much better. And that's playing with primarily with Smolder, Shapeshifter, Blaster. That improved a lot. If we take a look at Namzi, this build here, Shapeshifter Nasus, if you throw in 3 dragon, gives you a huge spike to 3.57 versus 2 dragons 5.25. So Namzi in this case is more of a trait bot for your Smolder because it activates his dragon upgrade. Seraphine and Soraka are quite viable now. I talked about that previously around this reroll build. The thing is that this pick rate's quite low and the average placement's quite low, though it is quite conditional on hitting good augments, specifically learning to spell. Mage Crown is quite good and can lead into it. Mage Crest also helps. Practice Partners. Learning to spell, though, is the really big one. Gives you a huge spike to 3.3 compared to the other ones that were in the 4 range. So if you get learning to spell, this is an auto pick, and Seraphine and Soraka can really carry you. Next, we'll go to 5 costs. So at 5 costs, it's especially important to take a look at, and this was suggested by Baso Skills, instead of just looking at the 5 cost stats here, since, for example, Nora will be extremely skewed by the comps that she plays in. So 8 Portal, playing around Mage Reroll. That if you are able to play a Nora and get it on her board, usually that's just going to be a 1 cost and not going to be as impactful as a pure unit and carry as some of these other 5 costs. So one of the ways to break that down is to look at the stats specifically for 2 stars with 3 items. So when I did break that down, this is kind of what the conclusions were. We have Briar being the highest win rate 2-star carry, then Morgana, Smolder, and Xerath rounding out the S tier. We have Diana, then Nora, Camille, and Milio last. Though of course Milio as even a 1-star can be quite a good carry. So this analysis is more so from the perspective of these 5 costs as carries. So Briar is going to fit into your Shapeshifter Blaster board as well as your Preserver Karma board. This is why it's so important to get to level 9 for that Karma Preserver board that pairs well with Nasus. Morgana, extremely flexible, can be played in a ton of boards. So Kalista, Ryze, Varus. So she can be played with pretty much all of your best 4-cost carries. So you can argue that Morgana is just the most flexible 5-cost in the game. Extremely valuable synergy trait-wise with Preserver and can carry. Smolder got a armor MR buff in this last patch. And if you add in the buffs to Shapeshifter, you can now play Smolder with a vertical Shapeshifter build. If you can get Smolder 2, Briar 2, that's definitely a win condition. And Xerath still continues to be very, very strong. You can cap with Arcana and is a very strong carry as well. In this tier, we have Diana, Camille, Milio, and Nora. I just put them all there just because Milio, even though statistically doesn't do as well, she's still very strong as a support unit, and Kalista as a build is still very strong. So that rounds out all of the unit tiers. Hopefully this exercise helped you get a better idea of what the best units are and what comps they play in, particularly since I was accounting for both the strength in the stats as well as how frequently you can play them in the most popular meta comps right now. If you enjoyed this video or have additional thoughts, comments, analysis, please add your comments in the comments below. I would really love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.